in.
Yeah, I see that.
Want to thank everybody who's listening in, who's joined our meeting tonight. We're going to talk about our master planning process and some of the options that have been developed through that process. But before we do that, I want to just tell you a little bit about the history of how we got to this point and then kind of where we're hoping to go next. So our board started facilities discussions in August of 2020, and we were just trying to determine what our priorities were for our facilities. We held a couple of community meetings for that time, but it became pretty apparent pretty quickly that the preschool and Deer Creek in particular definitely needed some upgrading due to the facility condition index provided by CDE, and RTA will talk a little bit about that here in the next few minutes. But also it became apparent that the board and myself, we just didn't have the expertise to determine the extent of our needs and how to best address those. So the board at that time decided to engage the services of a master planning team in May of 2021. And we began a process of collecting potential master planning team resumes and interest letters and packets. RTA was one of the 3 finalists that we chose to interview. And at the end of that interview process, the committee that did the interviewing also chose RTA as our team. So we started their process in June of 2021. Since then, we put together a master planning committee that consists of staff, parents, and business owners. And we looked at potential facility options as well as potential bond language. And then just this past August, the board approved bond language for the upcoming November election. That's ballot question 4A in Park County. And then last week, we held a very similar in-person meeting up at Deer Creek on last Thursday and just laid out a couple of options, gained some feedback, and answered questions, which is what we hope we'll do tonight as well. Let me tell you just a little bit about RTA. They've served over 40 school districts here in Colorado. They're a Colorado-based company, and they have extensive experience in assessing, planning, and designing educational facilities. Our presenters tonight will be Doug Abernathy, principal in charge, Christine Costa, our master planning production lead, and Ken Gregg, our project manager and education specialist. They put together some slides that summarize the work that's been done to this point, hopefully answer some of your whys. Why are we doing this? There may be some options to consider and give us feedback on. I'll be monitoring the chat, so if you have questions, please type them into the chat and I'll relay them to RTA. If you have a question that you think can go directly to me, you can just send it directly to me and I'll send you a direct response via the chat. So this is probably enough for me. So I'm going to turn it over to RTA and let them take it from here.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. So this is the same presentation as Mike mentioned that we did last week in person. And so a little bit of tweaking based on some of the comments from, I say the same and then I say tweaking. So there's a couple of slides where Christine added just a little bit more data for clarity on a couple of the slides on the site plans. And so we'll walk you through the process here. So Christine, do you want to go to the next slide?
Yep. And just before we go too much further, we are recording this meeting, and apparently legally I have to say that. So
Yes, you do.
yes, I do. So we're recording, people.
Yeah. So Mike did the introductions. We'll talk a little bit about RTA, the master plan schedule of date, which Mike touched on, the current school district facility condition summary that Mike mentioned also, that we'll share you some of the data, and Christine will go through some of the data associated with the facilities condition summary at this point and the work that we're doing as a firm, as an architectural firm. And then Christine's going to present master plan options A and B. And we've actually talked about probably 7 or more different options to this point and distilled it down to these core issues working with the planning assistance team to date. And then we'll, throughout this presentation, there'll actually be some polling questions that'll be a little different than last week that we'll actually do through Zoom, as one of our main goals as a group is really to collect feedback from the community about the master planning options, which will influence the decisions that are made by the district, by the school board and the planning assistance team on how to implement a project in the future if a bond is successful. So go ahead, Christine.
Okay. We're gonna try this. This is the first time I've used Zoom polls, so you guys see the poll. Sweet. Okay. So this is just us trying to get an idea of who's on the call, who we're talking to. And you can choose multiple, as many as what you are. I think, can you guys see the results here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the more of you that vote, the better we have an understanding from these meetings of who's participating in it. So there's 3 that are not, which probably more than likely maybe
Yes.
Christine, Ken, and I that are not voting at this point, but and maybe Mike as number 5. So
Okay, cool. We got some parents and employees, some concerned citizens and local business owners. Perfect. All right, I'm gonna end this.
Yep.
Sweet. That worked. All right. Doing great.
Excellent.
Okay, go ahead, Doug.
So just a little bit about RTA, as Mike mentioned. So we're a Colorado-based firm in Colorado Springs, and the map is actually not even quite current of all the different school districts that RTA has worked at across the state. And so almost 40 school districts, I think we've worked at across the state at this point. And so we've done, $750 million worth of K-12 education work over the last 10 years, from little small districts like Vilas down in the southeast part of the state to some of the bigger school districts on the Front Range, to all the way out west in Paradox and down south in Ignacio and Durango. We've done work. And really what that's provided us with is one, a long resume and understanding, but also sort of an objective approach to how we do master planning and how we compare facilities to your peers across the state and also to the state data that's collected. So just a little bit about, Mike mentioned it at the beginning, but where we are in the process. So the first phase of discovery, after we had been selected, was jumping in and getting to understand the existing facilities across the district, and also talking with Mike and the PAT to understand more about the district and set some priorities and some goals based on the mission and vision of the district. So that was the first phase of the project. The investigations really are about deeper understanding of the facilities and the facility condition index that was produced by the state, and then also our independent assessment that we've done of the district facilities. And then through a series of meetings, we've had 4 meetings with our planning assistance team. We've developed the goals and the strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats associated with the district and the master plan, but also developed a bunch of different options, a handful of different options for the master plan solution. And as you can see, we're now at the beginning of October with this meeting. The next phase is really assistance, quantifying this data from the community, getting this feedback, taking it back to the planning assistance team, and then sharing that data out with the community to support the district's goal of transparent communication and getting feedback from the community as we move towards a bond. And then the last phase that would be considered by the school board and by Mike would be looking at a grant assistance program. So the BEST program is part of the Colorado Department of Education. There's a competitive process that goes on at the state level where you apply. No one is guaranteed. It's based on need, and you apply for BEST grant assistance. And so we work with the school district, the board, and with the BEST program in order to find a path forward to make a grant for a project based on what we discussed as a group.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the current conditions and kind of the current state of the district. So right now we have 2 sites. They are about 15 minutes away from each other. So we have Deer Creek Elementary up here with the transportation building. It's about a 3-4 minute drive to 285. To get to Denver, it's another about 15 minutes from kind of this point. We do have a Rosalie site, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then we have the main, what we're calling it, the Platte Canyon site. We have the middle school, high school together, and we have the admin building with the high school gyms and the pool. And then across the street, the track and the football fields. Doug, do you want to talk a little bit about the Rosalie site?
Oh, so the Rosalie site is owned by the district, or a portion of that site is owned by the district. And we actually did a thorough analysis of that existing piece of property. There's been discussions in the past, as shared by the PAT and by Mike, on putting a school on that site. And there were some key factors that we looked at in relationship to that site. So life safety, of course, is a core issue associated with building schools, K-12 schools. And so we need certain infrastructure in order to support that. So we need water, we need fire water, we need good electricity to the site, we need good access to the site from public right of way. And then we need adequate land in order to use that site. And through the evaluation of Christine and Ken and the discussions with the PAT, the infrastructure on the Rosalie site is not there to support a school right now. So we don't have a lot of those elements on site in order to really support a school at this time. And it would be cost prohibitive right now compared to the other sites in the district to build on that site because of some of the constraints of the infrastructure.
And one of the main kind of wishes that the district had was to consolidate. And in evaluating that site, we cannot fit a K-12 on the site. And that kind of makes it so if we use that site, we always have to have another site for something else. So it just kind of, as we went through the process, it made less and less and less and less sense. So we're not ignoring that site, but it did get kicked off the island.
So a little bit, Mike mentioned this at the beginning, a little bit about what the state provides as a baseline. It's not the only answer, as we said before, but it's a baseline of information. And so they do assessments on a recurring basis through the state, and they do, and they actually evaluate all the buildings in a district, or you request some of those evaluations. So they come up with what they call an FCI score. And so you can see the definition on the right. And really it's a benchmark that they use for what's the condition of the facility, how much repair is required of the facility versus what's the value of the facility. And so then you get a score. It's basically from 0 to 0.99. And most of the schools don't end up at that number, of course. Nobody typically ends up at a 0.99, but you can see in the graphic that Christine has pointed out here that we have Platte Canyon RE1, which is highlighted on the map. The green designation on the map, on that patchwork map, means that those facilities are in good shape or in better shape than their peers. As you get lighter shades of green, then they're not as quite as good a shape. As you get into the reds and the oranges, you're into buildings that have a significant higher score, which means that they are in more need of repair for those buildings. And so you can see the bottom paragraph that Christine has on if the FCI score is above 50%, then then the building is likely in need of major renovations or replacement. And that's really a case-by-case basis on whether you decide whether you're going to renovate or whether you're going to replace a building. You can see that the schools, we're going to go through each individual school, and the district overall score is at about a 60. The bar chart, the pie chart on the lower right-hand side of it identifies major components. And so the major components of the building really can really influence FCI scores. So those are expensive components of the building. So the mechanical system for fresh air, for heating and cooling, of course, the electrical system, the sanitary sewer, fire protection, plumbing systems are all integral systems to a building. They're more expensive. And so those tend to have a heavier weight because of their cost and their impact on the facility than smaller things. But the state assesses everything, and then we actually come behind and do some additional validation of that number. And you can see at the bottom, the state totals. You can see both on the number of buildings that are looked at, the number of sites, and then the total dollar value there of 1.3 billion that we have there in total value of sites. So significant amount of peer data that's collected.
Okay, so we're gonna go through, the state evaluated these schools in 2017. And so in 2017, there were a certain FCI score. And if, they evaluated a certain system and it said, this has about a 3-year lifespan. And if it still today isn't repaired or replaced, it gets kicked into the it's not working anymore category. So that's where we get this updated 0.87. So it's pretty up there on the FCI score. And it's not an unsafe building whatsoever. This building has been taken care of, probably extended the life of the systems. It's stretching it pretty far, and they've been maintained. But when they do go, they will be expensive. So that's kind of what this is telling us, is you're limping along here. It's great, it's working, but we're gonna have to do something soon.
Yep.
Is there anything else you want to say about Deer Creek?
No, keep going, Christine. This is
Okay.
perfect.
The middle school and the high school were evaluated together, and had they been separated, it's kind of, the high school probably would be more of like a 0.2, and the middle school might be closer to a 0.6 or so. But since they were put together, we're taking the average of those two. So the middle school is kind of pulling the high school down because it's a great building and it's in great condition. It's been maintained really well. The biggest problem with this building is that the high school students have to cross the parking lot to get to their gymnasiums and their auditoriums. So that's kind of the big E. We need to fix this. And then the admin, gym, pool, classroom building, this nice multi-use building is at a 0.6. And in our RTA's evaluations of this building, we did note that the HVAC systems are very close to failing, if not almost there. They're kind of leaking. So we do another evaluation on top of this one that's a lot more detailed. And this one is in not great shape. But we do have both of the high school gyms and the auditorium in this building.
And
So
it's some of
something to
that
note.
the overall systems, like you've talked about, Christine, that are really influencing the score on this building. And like you mentioned, the status of the mechanical system, the boilers, the electrical system, all of those things are expensive systems in that building. with limited use of that facility right now, other than the pool, which is, I mean, there's facilities that are used, but not on a day-to-day, full-day basis like the other facilities.
Right, so when the school district has a budget for repair, this building, they're kind of stretched so thin across all of their buildings. This one is not the priority because the kids get it first, obviously, right? So. Okay, second poll. After all that we told you, which wasn't that detailed, but just an overall, do you guys see the poll? Okay, you do. How concerned are you about the existing conditions of the facilities? Okay. We got most people because we're not voting.
Yep.
And most people are fairly to very concerned, which we are as well. Okay, I'm gonna end this one. Keep going. Oh, we got another one. All right. Okay, so this poll, we're going to tell you the options and show you kind of our thought process and how we got there. But we want to just kind of get an idea of what your preconceptions are, because we know moving the elementary school and preschool down to the middle school, high school site has been discussed. It's not a new topic. So we just kind of want to know where you stand before we start telling you what we've done so far.
It's funny, Christine, the poll says probably not, and on this slide, and then the poll says probably note.
Oh my goodness.
It's okay. I think everybody understands.
I got it right
It's
over
this
here.
way.
Just look at this. Probably note. It's just a little accent. Okay, so we
19
have a
of
no
21.
never. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so we're gonna show you option A and option B. We've kind of narrowed all of the many options down to these two, and each option has a couple little options in between inside of it. These are the big moves that we want to talk about. So option A would be maintaining both campuses. We would renovate and add a pre-K addition to Deer Creek Elementary, and add a secure entry to that building as well. And I'll show you a bigger plan of it as well. Down at the middle school, high school site, we would demo the middle school and put everybody into the high school building because they fit. We would add a CTE and an admin area, so everybody would kind of be out of this, the admin pool building, and we would renovate the pool building into the bus depot. I have admin in both spots. I just noticed that. We're not sure yet. Okay. So Platte Canyon site for option A, we would, because we're taking away 2 of the high school gyms, we would add gyms, a larger gym here that could be divided with a curtain. It would also serve as the auditorium for the high school. And then have a CTE admin addition that would have a safe passageway to the field. And then we would demo like half of this building, keep the community pool and turn part of the building into the transportation building. So buses would be down at this site.
So a couple of things here, as Christine mentioned. So CTE is architects speak for career and technical education. And so think of more hands-on sort of learning opportunities based on, district's goals for career and technical education. And those evolve with time. And so we want to build flexible spaces that can handle different career and technical education applications. So, it used to be welding and woodwork. It may be drones and 3D printing. It may be robotics. It could be all sorts of different things over the course of the next 10 to 20 years. And so we want to build flexible spaces in order to accommodate those educational needs where we can accommodate them in the existing high school building. The other thing is that the entry of the administration of the existing building is on the north side. And from a safety and security standpoint, which is one of the goals of the planning assistance team, we want to address safety and security, is getting the front door where Christine has the orange triangle, so that we have visibility of the parking lot. We have a clear drop-off location and entry to the building. And we would solve this is again at a conceptual level that we're solving this. We have the amount of space that we need to make it happen. We haven't started a design process. It would happen later to flush all those things out based on the districts, the communities, and the design advisory group that would drive that solution. The other thing that is happening on the west side of the building is the middle school and the high school is combining, because we have plenty of space right now, into the existing high school building. There's already an 8th grade pod that is already existing in the high school building. And it would really be about consolidating resources for the district, consolidating square footage to maintain, and creating a great learning environment in the existing high school. And then you can see we've got a parking lot shown on the west side of the building, but that's probably a combination of parking, outdoor PE space, other outdoor learning sort of space that would occur on the west half of that option A site. Did I miss anything, Christine?
This is the cafeteria and the middle school gym. So those are still there.
Yep.
So we still have a middle school gym and a high school gym.
So we have a question in the chat. Would this option include an updated playground for the middle school?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
they have nowhere to play.
Yes, we would absolutely address that, Mike, through the process, because middle schoolers need places to go outside for a period of time too. And so we would make sure that we'd incorporate that. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, so the other part of option A, since we're maintaining both campuses, is the renovation and addition of Deer Creek Elementary. So what we have right now are, I think, 8 modulars that are still you can still kind of see them. So we would use those to our advantage to renovate. And the reason we're not completely tearing down and rebuilding in this option is because we would have to displace all of the preschool and elementary school kids down to probably the middle school, which would require renovations in order to comply with preschool and elementary school requirements, which means lots more plumbing fixtures. And then they would kind of be wasted. It's kind of wasting money doing that. So we thought this would be the better option to show, is renovating and putting an addition on. Okay. Where was I? Modulars.
Addition.
Okay. So the first thing we would do is build this addition here. So it would involve the preschool and a new secure entry, because you don't really have a secure entry here. After that is built, we would move the pre-K into their new space. And then we would start the phased renovation of Deer Creek, which means as we work on this building, we would move kids out to the modulars. And as we finish the space, they would move back in. And then another space would get moved out to the modulars. And then once we're done with the renovation, those modulars would go away because you don't need them anymore. And then the final phase would be all this site work. So new playgrounds, paved driveways so you don't have that canyon at the exit. And expanded parking, because we heard that you sometimes run out of parking here.
And
Anything else?
just improving circulation on the site by maximizing the lower part of your red loop where the existing modulars are for the preschool. And the way that this typically works is that the schools, we've done this for a long time, and there's a lot of qualified contractors that would be able to renovate schools while they're occupied. And it's not a stretch to do that at all. It's a safe environment. It can be handled in phases, so it's not too disruptive to both students and staff. And there's logistics that go along that would be solved through the design process. But more than likely, what we would see is you would see grades move from in the building out to modulars. It wouldn't be sort of a patchwork of 1 or 2 classrooms. It would be in larger groups in areas of the building where you would move specific grades out and specific grades in. You traditionally move the upper grades during the school year because they're a little bit more flexible. They're a little more adaptable as far as a 4th or 5th grader getting out into a modular, as opposed to a kindergartner or 1st and 2nd grader, where we typically want to do that work in the summers when we would do that work.
And when we do this, a lot of schools, you have to bring in modulars or figure something else out. The great thing about this option is you have the modulars there that we can use. So it is another advantage we're trying to take, another thing we're trying to take advantage of to be more economical with the whole plan.
Question in the chat, how long would a renovation take?
It's probably in this phase renovation, it would probably take 16 to 18 months to do this work. So you would start probably in the spring, which spring comes late at the Deer Creek site, but it would start in the spring and it would probably finish in the following year after the summer. So the building would be complete during the summer, so that following fall, it would be occupied. But the site work tends to fall behind that because you've got to remove the modulars, do the work on the site, and then finish the site work. The playground would probably be completed over a couple of summers.
Another question, would there be a theater space in option A at the high school?
It would be we would build a gymnasium as part of that had music stage, support space, and had the ability to function as an auditorium space or as a theater space along with the gymnasium. You know, the best uses that we can get out of the spaces are multiple functions, and technology has changed so dramatically with acoustics and sound systems and such that we have a lot more flexibility. Would it be as nice as a new auditorium in a new high school? No, but it could function really, really well with good acoustics, good lighting in that space.
And there'd be an actual stage, right? It wouldn't just
That's
be.
correct.
Yeah.
Stage, music room, green space, and all this support, you know, a thriving performing arts center or performing arts program that you would have in the building. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, so this is just comparing existing Deer Creek Elementary to the proposed in pink. So what we're really doing is taking these modulars out of the equation. You still have a 3-round school with pre-K. What you're getting is a fully sprinkled, up-to-date, really good condition school with a safe entry and preschool with their own parking.
And so the last time we had this discussion with the community in person, there was some discussion about what happened in the existing elementary school, and sort of think of it as extreme school makeover. And so all of the systems inside of the building, the finishes, would all be replaced as part of this process. We would make some modifications structurally to the building, but we would keep the structure, the basic structure of the building that's in good shape, that portion of the building would remain in place.
And then this slide, I'm going to show you this for both options as well. This is just district-wide square footage added up. So basically, these are the square footage that the district has to maintain right now. So 257,727 square feet. So spread pretty thin. A consolidated district where everyone still fits is 210,696 square feet. So you have an 18% more efficient district if we pick option A. Okay, let me go back and make sure there's no other questions about option A before I get into option B. No one's typing. Okay. All right. Option B is consolidating everyone down to that Platte Canyon site with the middle school, high school. So we would move the entire elementary and preschool down to this site. We would demo the middle school still. We would still consolidate the middle school, high school, and then we would build a new elementary and admin.
Christine,
So
I'm
we
gonna
don't-
just, do you mind if I interrupt real quick? Got a question. What does round school mean?
Oh, rounds of school, it means there's 3 classes of each. So there's 3 fifth grade classes, 3 fourth grade classes. That's a round. Did I explain that right? Okay.
Ken's shaking his head yes, so we're going
Did I right? A round of school. That's a good question. I'm just like, you can ask any of that stuff because I just do architecture speak all day. So sometimes I don't make sense. All right, option B, we're consolidating everyone. So that means I can show you everything on one plan here. So we have a very similar situation as what will happen on option A. We have middle school, high school consolidated. We still have the kitchen, the cafeteria, and the middle school gym attached. We have a new gym for the high school because we took their gym away over here, 2 gyms. And then we have a CT admin addition with that secure entry kind of facing the parking lot. The new thing is the elementary school that would be down here. This is currently where the admin building is right now. So you can see there is an option to keep the pool within the elementary school and we could build around it. Or we could possibly maintain this as a community pool and build a true K-12 and do an elementary addition over here. So you can see the alternate. So this just shows you that we don't have this set in stone. This just means the elementary would come down here in some way, shape, or form, and we would figure that out where best to put it in a design process.
And that's what we're looking for community input on, because I think the planning assistance team, when we were going through this process, of course, talked about safety and security as the highest priority. And at that time with the PAT, it felt like a standalone elementary was a good option to address those things and separate the students. But as Christine is noting, we're still open to a discussion about that at this point, and we want that feedback because it's important for us to get it. The main thing here is that we're really consolidating, as Christine said, into this option, into the Platte Canyon site. So keep going, Christine. Talk about.
I've got just two questions that are related. Are population growth in consideration? If so, how many years? And how much room for growth is there in student population for both options?
So based on historical data, or the last 5 to 7 years of data that we've looked at for the district's enrollment has either been steady or slightly declining. And so through this process, we're not looking to grow the facilities at this point. Based on the trend of the last 7 years, it feels like we're either steady or slightly declining. And so we're not building additional capacity in the buildings right now. as part of the design process, what Ken always advocates for is that we plan for future growth in the buildings, and we may show where those classrooms would go, but we're not necessarily going to build for future growth that's undefined at this point.
And I can chime in just a little bit, which is our current student population is about 840, and that includes preschool as well. The high school building alone can hold that many kids, just the way it is right now. So it'd be a stretch, to be tight, but the capacity for that high school building is anywhere from mid 600 to low end 800. So it can certainly be done even just in that facility.
And that high school was designed with flexibility in mind, which again, these facilities would do the same. So when you walk through that high school, you can see there's pods, there's different ways to make room for growth without having empty rooms sitting around. And that's the objective, is to not have these empty rooms. What else? Did I miss anything on this one? We have the a small bus depot over here. It's about 8,000 square feet. So we would make it a pull through. If we did the elementary school over here, we would build a transportation building over here. If we built the elementary school somewhere in this area, we would possibly look at doing what we did in option A and using existing facilities to make the bus depot, or building over here.
Question about traffic. What about traffic with all the children at this site? Even now, without the elementary school on site, traffic can be really difficult.
Yes. We have had conversations with CDOT. They've brought up some different ideas. None of them were traffic lights. But they do have different ideas on how to make this area safer. What they do at CDOT is react to situations rather than be proactive about situations. So even if we told them, hey, we're putting an elementary school here, they're going to monitor traffic. We're going to do traffic studies if we did this here. And it's all going to be a large review process. But traffic on 285 is not going to ever be great.
Well, and it's probably not going to decrease either, right? And so there has to be a solution. The one thing that we're doing with the two red loops and the purple loop is that we're separating some traffic flow for elementary school drop off and pick up and middle high school. And there's a hybrid in there, as you guys all know, because there's could be students at both facilities. And so we would arrange things so that so those things could occur appropriately. And then the other thing that since buses are going to be down here, then we have to have some good logistics for the buses. So once the buses arrive back to the site in the morning, they aren't leaving the site again, they're staying there. And then they're picking students up at the end of the day. And then, one of the challenging things is going to be leaving the site at the same time. And there's probably some things that can be done logistically by the district as far as start times and let out and dismissal times to modify that slightly. And also talk about how the flow and the schedules work between the two buildings in order to manage that as best you can within a window. It's not going to be hours apart, but it may be minutes apart on how those work, so you can help with a little bit of that. But the challenge that, one of the challenges will be continuing to work with CDOT to continue to monitor this situation and improve it down the road. And so we have acceleration and deceleration lanes, which allow us to get on and to get off of 285 going westbound. The more difficult move that I think everyone has experienced that has to be really explored is leaving the site going eastbound on 285. And there are different scenarios that CDOT has implemented across the state to address that. We're not making an obligation at this time on how it's going to be solved. All we're doing is Christine and Ken have done is started the conversations with CDOT to understand our options. So Christine, the one thing that you didn't talk about on that site plan is that there was discussions of different options just through a brainstorming session with CDOT, and they talked about acceleration, deceleration, turn lanes, things like that. But they also talked about what they, roundabouts is something they use, is a higher speed roundabout that they use. CDOT didn't, the only thing that CDOT really eliminated from the discussion from their perspective was a light, was adding an additional light on 285. As everyone knows in the community, they're in the process of eliminating a light further east of here, closer to the elementary school site. And that's the only thing that really they really talked about. So it's really about a dialogue moving forward.
And they referenced when we talked about roundabouts, the one in Breckenridge, that's on that main, which road is that? Going up to I-70.
Yeah, the highway. It's on
Yeah,
the highway, but in
Yeah.
Breckenridge. Yep.
yeah.
Well,
So
there's
that was
several
our
of them.
reference point, but yeah.
There's several of them actually.
Another question about option B, if this is the preferred option, what is going to happen with the existing elementary school location?
So since the district owns that property outright, there is some value to that land. There's one value for that land with a school on the property. And then there's a different value for that land when there is no school on that property and it's an open green piece of land. What we would traditionally do based on the community's input is we would have that piece of property, have an assessment done of that piece of property to determine the value of the property, both with the school on it, without the school on it. And then at some point in the future, if that was the direction we went with option B, then the district would be faced with some choices to make on whether to hold on to that property or whether to sell that property. It's not factored into the solutions at this point because it's still off in the future. And it's really determined by what's the market value of that property in the future. And it changes, monthly, daily. And so no decision has been made or even recommended by the planning assistance team or by RTA. We just know that it's a future consideration.
More data for option B. So since this is a new elementary school build, we did a case study of a school we just completed down in Canyon City last year. The difference is this is a 3-round school without pre-K, but everything else is very similar. So we have the case study data here. It's a 1st and 2nd floor school, so we have some room up top. They have a gym, a cafetorium, and a full kitchen. So the proposed consolidated elementary would be about 12,000 square feet up top on the 2nd floor, about 48,000 square feet on the 1st floor. 1 gymnasium, a cafetorium, so an auditorium / cafeteria, and possibly just a warming kitchen. We may be able to pick up some efficiency by using the high school, middle school kitchen and just transporting food into the warming kitchen instead of having a full-blown kitchen in here. And then possibly, if it works out in the design, to keep that pool and incorporate it into the building with a separate entrance. So that's taken into account as well. And then the full square footage of the district, again, that's 257,000 square feet existing maintained square footage in option B. We're 27% more efficient at 189,000 square feet. So a pretty big jump with this one, but that's just because they're all on one site. Okay, so we have the pros and cons of option A and B. And what we have, we're going to try this out. we have a post-meeting survey. So when you log off this meeting, it's going to ask you whether you prefer A or B as an option. So we aren't going to have that as a live poll. You're just going to see it pop up as soon as you close this meeting. So we'll go over the pros and cons, and then we'll answer any questions. And then as soon as you log off, that's when you can pick one.
And I think everyone can sort of read the pros and cons, and as a community member, you probably have more of both pros and cons for each of them. I think one of the reasons that the PAT wanted to come to the community is really because there are these two distinct options that have been talked about in the past. And really what the district's goal is to get feedback on the approach for the district. The bond measure that's on, that will be put in front of you with 4A, doesn't have a preferred solution in that option. What we really are doing between now and when the community votes is really trying to seek feedback so that we understand what the community prefers and what the approach is, because that will help inform the district's decision moving forward if the bond is successful. And so we really want the feedback from the community, and we'll share that information out after. We haven't shared the data out from our in-person meeting last week, and really to honor the process so that no one is influenced by the data that we collected last week or the data that we're collecting tonight with everyone. And so we really want to get that feedback for the district and for the planning assistance team that's working on the master plan so that we can share that out with both that group and then ultimately with the community. Anything else, Christine?
I think we just have the question slide.
Okay.
Point to the chat.
So this is, so Christine did this through so when we were together in person, we did this through a different software, but tonight really through the chat button at the bottom of your Zoom, some of the folks have been using the chat, but if there are other concerns that you want us to address tonight, or you want us to take back to the planning assistance team for the master plan, we can take that back. Excellent. All right, Mike, anything else that you wanted to say tonight?
One question late here. Is there a price difference between the two options?
So the bond language sets the dollar amount for the project. We're of course going to find the right solution with that. Part of the process, of course, is looking at our options for matching funds through the BEST program or other options. And that dollar amount will determine our path forward. And so the obligation for the district is the same, no matter what option is chosen. What we will do from that point forward is that the elementary school, either new that we've proposed or renovation that we've proposed in option A, is a primary driver for this solution. But as you've seen, there are other parts of this process that need to be addressed. So whether it's gymnasiums at the high school, CTE and admin, and also with the bus depot, we'll right size those components in order to fit within the dollars available. So $33.9 million that is on the bond will only satisfy a portion of what we've presented as a long-term master planning option. The remainder of those funds have to come through those other grant opportunities and fundraising strategies, and then prioritization. But what we've presented, both of these options can be achieved with some support.
Okay, what are the safeguards with elementary combined with junior high school and high school?
So I think the key there is a couple of things. So there's one, there's scheduling and how the building is utilized, and how often do the students interact from the elementary to the junior high and the high school. And some of it is scheduling that Mike would work out with his leadership team on the principal side in order to minimize that interaction where necessary. The other thing that's done is that from a design perspective, the shared spaces become key to the discussion. So whether it's cafeteria, whether it's breakfast or lunch, whether it's after school programs, there would be a very defined approach to how we would create those interactive spaces. Through the course of the school day, the way that Ken and I have worked on these buildings before, there's not as much interaction between those students unless it's intentional. And so we tend to create zones in the building where only elementary school students sort of occupy, where middle school students occupy, and where high school students occupy. And then there's always some crossover, which is both can be a weakness, but we tend to see those spaces as benefits.
Even
anything else to add with that from a safety and security standpoint?
I think you hit it. The biggest thing probably is the way the building is zoned to minimize those interactions, and in having two separate, clearly defined, entries for the two is also important. Where the elementary kids are coming and going, and where the high school and junior high kids are coming and going. So it's really about zoning the site, zoning the building, and understanding what spaces they're going to interact and share, and how you handle where those are located within the building. It's certainly solvable.
Yeah.
I have a question for somebody. In one of the maps, it shows that the bus barn, the fueling station, is at the far west end. It's not as close to the students as it is on the other maps. Where are the actual property lines on any of these maps? Is there any other way to go further out with the bus barns?
So we do have the property line shown as this white dotted line. It's very faint.
We can, Bonnie, we can, we're just showing it diagrammatically at this point, and some of it comes down to circulation, but where Christine's showing the bus depot on the west end of the site, that could move, slightly further away, depending on circulation around it and how we orient that
Are
bus
the
depot.
fuel tanks going to be underground? Do you know?
So they tend to be really expensive when they're underground. That is definitely an option. If they're above ground, there's very specific criteria about how you have to build those, manage them from an environmental standpoint. And so we haven't gotten to that level of detail yet, but there are a couple of different options to handle that.
It'd be nice to have them way out on the property and not near any of the students or traffic.
Right. And there's actually some specific requirements, Bonnie, around separation of fuel tanks to educational facilities. And Ken, I thought it was 500 feet, but do you remember anything different?
I don't remember specifically, but there is a distance requirement.
Yeah, it's either 500 or 1,000 feet, Bonnie, depending on the size of the tank, drives some of that. And so we've got some minimums that we have to meet no matter what.
Okay. Well, it's just something to consider maybe. And Mike, maybe this question is for you, or to take back to the administration and Fair Play. The elementary land seems like it should be sold, and all of the proceeds go toward this new school, rather than holding on to it or waiting.
Yeah, I agree. I think that'll be the board's decision. Hopefully, Bonnie, we get to that point where we've passed the bond and we're moving forward with the project, and then absolutely that'll be a decision that needs to be made by the board. I don't know what else we would use it for.
Well, I don't either, but I would think selling it to a land developer would be the best option. And if you have to demo that whole thing, is there any asbestos left in that building? Like under flooring or anything else?
I believe there is, Bonnie, but I don't know that right off the top of my head, but I do believe there is some there on site. It's not, I don't recall it as being everywhere, but I do recall there being some that had to be taken care of.
Okay.
Other questions? Thank you, Bonnie.
And we can always, if you are shy and don't want to ask questions now, you can certainly email those to me and I can pass those on to Doug and Christine and Ken, but also to our planning assistance team, which will continue to meet. And just want to thank everybody, not only those of you who are participating, in terms of the questions, but also who are here to hear the options and vote and give us feedback. As Doug mentioned, we value the feedback and we will certainly use our community's input on how we proceed. I just appreciate everybody's time, and I know you've got a lot of other things you could do on a Monday night rather than be with us. So I appreciate that. Appreciate all the work Doug and Christine and Ken have done to this point, and we're certainly looking forward to hopefully we're doing a lot more in the future. One more question. Yeah, okay. And Doug answered it about an elevator in the middle school. If it would be 2 floors, and yeah, there would be an elevator. Have to be in order for our, some of our kids who may need it and staff members who may need it.
Great, thanks, Mike. So Christine, you want to recap the poll here at the end as people leave?
Yes, so as you exit, this is the question you're gonna see pop up on your screen. I hope. Pretty sure it's gonna work. So we just want to know, after everything we've told you, would you prefer to see option A, Deer Creek maintained and renovated with an addition and 2 sites, or option B, consolidate everyone down at the Platte Canyon site, which is middle school, high school?
Great. Thank you, everyone, for your time tonight. We really appreciate you jumping on the Zoom call with us. As Mike said, we appreciate the feedback and really value it. So thank you again, and we'll be back in touch through Mike to communicate more information.